2 more minutes, but just wanted to thank you all for coming to this panel. I see so many recognizable faces, and I'm glad to be seeing new ones. So if you don't know who we are, I'm Manti Sunkara. I am the founder of Asian Queens Animation. And thank you. Yes, thank you. And this is our first in-person panel since we started in 2020. So our team was a little nervous, but, we're happy. And, seeing all your faces and the little cheers is making us really pumping us up. But if this is our first Lightbox too, so, this is, I think, the second Lightbox. So great to see all of you here. Or maybe it's the third. I think it's the third. But yeah, thank you all for coming. And if you're new and you don't know what Asian Queens in Animation is, we are a community and an organization in the making, hoping to empower Asians of underrepresented gender identities in animation and visual effects and gaming. So yeah, today we're joined by this lovely panel of leaders in animation, and we're going to talk to them about their career and how they got to where they are, and what they do is how they accomplish their careers as leaders. So everyone give them a round of applause. Awesome. Well, let me just check the time. Well, we have 1 more minute, so I guess we'll wait for 1 minute. But is this everyone's first Lightbox? Feel free to raise your hand. Oh my gosh, a lot of first. Oh my gosh. Okay. Is this your first panel of the day? Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay, that's a lot of pressure. Hopefully we live up to it. Okay. If you've heard of Asian Queens in Animation, raise your hand. Awesome. Well, if this is new to you, will you go follow us later? Yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, we hit 3:30, so let's get started. Let's start with meeting our panelists. So we'll go down, and everyone feel free to introduce yourselves, your name, what you do, your pronouns, and what you're looking forward to in the Lightbox.
I am Josie Trinidad. I am a director at Walt Disney Animation Studios. My pronouns are she and her. And what else would you?
What you looking forward to this?
I want to go check out the exhibitor floor and see some friends and see some great artists. And this is my first Lightbox. I'm very excited.
Yay!
Narhita Vani. Hello, my name is Vani. They call me Saraswati, which is a long Indian name. I'm a writer, director, and creator. I started my own studio called Dancing Atoms, which primarily focuses on preschool and writing animated feature films.
Hi, my name is Megha Davala, and I'm a CG supervisor at Spire Animation. My pronouns are she and her, and it's my first Lightbox too, and I'm very excited to be familiar, friendly faces from over the years here.
This mic stand is very thin. Hi, I'm Shin Park, pronoun she, her. I'm a production manager over at Marvel Studios on an animated production. And this is also my first Lightbox, and also my first time seeing a lot of people in this industry in the past 2.5 years. So it's a very exciting day.
Woo! Good. So yeah, these are our panelists, and we're gonna get started in the nitty gritty. The first question we have for you is, why did you decide to pursue a career in animation and entertainment? Shin, would you like to start?
So there's a short answer and there's a long answer. The long answer goes all the way back to when I was 5, but basically, long story short, I immigrated to America when I was 5 years old from Korea, and then there was a pretty big language barrier. And the one and the only things that I could really connect with on TV was Tom and Jerry, because they didn't speak any English. So I was like, wow. And so it was the first type of kind of entertainment medium that allowed me to feel comfortable, that's allowed me to feel like a kid in a new community, in a very scary and a big new place. And so growing up, I got into animation because I wanted to continue pushing that sentiment forward of creating meaningful content to kids who need that kind of space. And actually, not only kids, but really anybody who needs that space of belonging. But yeah.
Okay. So if you ask any one of my friends, they'll say it's because I wanted to walk the red carpet and go to the Oscars, but that's not really true. Similar to her story, when I was around 5, I think that's when I saw Little Mermaid in theater, and I was just so blown away by escaping reality and bringing, so much joy, color, in that medium. And then growing up, there was a lot of technology coming up, and once I was able to marry technology and art in this animation field, I was like, that's exactly what I want to do. And just seeing how it's progressed over the years, over the last 20, 30 years, it's been like a dream.
So my story is actually it's my father. My father was a banker back home in India in 1980s, and he just had this vision back then, and he wanted to bring animated stories from India to the world. And this was 84, I think, and me and my kid brother were very tiny. And I remember he sold my mom's jewelry. And there was no big fuss in the house, though. And he just made some art, wrote some art, wrote some stories, made some art, hired a bunch of artists, and kind of put everything together and went to Annecy in 1984. So that's how I kind of tumbled upon animation. And I saw the light that he had in his eyes. Like animation made him alive. So that's my story.
It's a great story. I was born here, and when I was 5, I watched Cinderella in the movie theaters, and so I grew up loving Disney animation in particular. And when I was 11 years old or so, or when I was a kid, me and my best friend were watching Robin Hood on VHS. And we paused it, and it started to play frame by frame. And I don't know, for some reason that was very funny to us. But then I realized, looking at these images, I realized that they were drawings. It was the first time, I grew up loving Tom and Jerry, and I consumed all media, and I loved cartoons especially. But this was the first time that it hit me, those are drawings. Those are actual drawings that are done by a human being. Because I always loved to draw and that sort of thing. But it finally clicked there's a human being, there's an artist behind the drawings, and I could do that. And so from then on, I was obsessed with becoming a Disney animator in particular. And so I didn't do that immediately. I went to high school and I learned how to draw and stuff like that. But and my parents were more encouraging me to get a real job and go to a real university. But after I graduated from UCLA, I sort of was I have to pursue animation. And so I studied at Cal Arts and all that kind of stuff. But it just started with a love of medium, of hand-drawn, especially hand-drawn animation. Awesome. Yeah. So what's up? Sure, So, sort of spinning off of that, why don't we talk about where you started your path and how that led you here to where you are today? So, Juice, you want to start and we can go down? Sure. Yeah. So my family, I feel like it was luck because my dad, my parents were born in the Philippines, and my dad, he had a friend from college that he had a son, and they connected in Canada. This is all very meandering, but they connected in Canada, and it turns out that this family friend was attending Cal Arts for character animation. It was a guy named Ted T, who he was an animator at Disney and DreamWorks for many years, and now he's doing other things, many great things. So I just so happened he was going to Cal Arts, and we lived in Southern California and became his surrogate family in the United States. So we would, he would spend Thanksgiving with us and things like that. And that's when we took him to Cal Arts.
it's all extremely lucky. We took him to CalArts, and I got to see the character animation department for the first time. I was 14 years old, and that's where again, I'm very lucky. That's when I realized, like, oh, this is the school where I could learn to become an animator and then work at Disney. So I feel like it was just good fortune. But Ted was the one who told me, like, I was like, how do I go to CalArts? And he said, learn how to draw and that sort of thing. So I sort of was training to become a 2D animator. And then when I graduated from CalArts, 2D was going downhill. Or at least like Disney Animation was no longer doing hand-drawn films as much as CG. And so I was sort of, whoops, wrong career. Remember, I don't know. And then also when I got to CalArts, I trained, I did life drawing and stuff like that. But then when I got to CalArts, I'm like, this is it. I've made it. Hooray. I'm going to Disney tomorrow. Then at CalArts Character Animation, I realized that I was a really bad animator. I was like, oh my goodness, I don't understand timing. And then I tried to do CG, and I was like, I don't understand the Z space. It was sort of horrifying to realize, like, I had achieved my goals. I'm a very studious person. And then yet I was like, oh my gosh, I put all my eggs in one basket, and I'm really not, I don't know if I'm going to be an animator. And that's when I realized that there was story. And because we had animation class, we had story, we had layout and all that sort of thing. And story is where, and storyboarding is where I was like, oh, you know what? You don't have to draw as well. It's a 2D anime. You don't have to understand the timing and the math, and you can just do the real crusty looking comic book like panels and sort of do the same thing. So I fell in love with story at CalArts, and I thankfully, again, very, very fortunate to have teachers from Disney Animation at CalArts and folks who went on to go work at Pixar and all over the industry. So I feel like I was very, very lucky, very fortunate. I of course worked my tail off so that I could pay off student loans. But I really, I don't know. And then after I graduated CalArts, again, the industry was not at a great place. And so I did illustration work and freelance and stuff like that. And then lo and behold, Disney Animation started a story internship. And for me, it was like Willy Wonka was opening up the chocolate factory for the first time. And he was allowing, like, he said he had tickets to go into the factory. And so I thankfully applied for this story apprenticeship, and I was accepted, and I've been at Disney ever since. And again, I consider myself very, very fortunate, and just a lot of strange, lucky incidences.
And just in case people don't know, Josie's co-directing Zootopia Plus coming soon, so... Yeah. So go watch that.
My story is really, being born in India. I was very far away from any of this. Leave alone, there was not even an animation industry back then. There was not even schools that taught animation. I knew I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to be a director. So the easiest thing, or the most convenient thing, was to go and work at the director and be their assistant. So I did that at the age of 16. I didn't want to go to school. And I said, this is it. This is where I'm going to be. And when I went onto the movie set down south in India, I was told after a week that I wouldn't be physically safe here. So I was told that it was not the place for a woman, and it was not safe, and it was safe. So I didn't know what else to do. So I said, you know what? What is a safe place? And right then, the visual effects industry was kind of coming in, where you had security guards who were managing and minding really expensive machines. So I said, all right, that's my door in to being a filmmaker, and that's how I'm going to get into being in visual effects, animation, and all of that. So I did that for a bit, and I was very fortunate to be at the right place at the right time. So this Academy Award-winning studio called Ribbon and Hughes who did Life for Pi. Anybody seen Life for Pi? Okay, great. So they back then they did Babe, which is a talking pig. And so they were coming to India and they were looking at finding a partner that they could partner with and do some work. And they happened to ask me. I was at a studio and said they said, "Oh, what do you think about partnership and what do you think about producing Hollywood level work in India?" And I said, "Are you kidding me?" Like, how do you expect anything to happen without the right training? How do you expect any work to come out of it? So a year later, they hired me, and I became a founder of Rhythm MPC. Yeah, and I started Rhythm and Hughes from my apartment. Uh, really, like John Hughes and Pauline and Keith, who read them, look them up. They started Rhythm and Hughes from their garage about 30 years ago. So when they said, what would you do? I said, I would invest. So I never thought I would run a studio. I never wanted to ever run a studio or manage it, but it just happened thanks to wonderful people and my husband here. He was one of the key people that had come down to India from Los Angeles, and that's how, it's a love story, but I'll tell you that later. But that led me to managing with the Infuse and running 4 different facilities. Had no clue how to do it. Did it. And then I went to DreamWorks for about a year in Shanghai, and I decided that was time that I set up something. And it's been 7 years. I put said
It's very hard to follow that. It's very inspiring. I had a couple of unconventional roadblocks growing up. So I grew up born and raised in Texas, first generation Indian in this country. And back in the 80s and 90s, if you were an Indian person being raised in America, you were expected to become a doctor or a lawyer. And so like 99% of my community in San Antonio was going that way in the Indian community. And so I was like the black sheep. My first step was like trying to get my parents' approval. That was, it wasn't as hard with my dad. He's a big movie buff, obsessed with, visual effects. So it was a little easier, but he made a deal with me saying, if you get a computer science undergrad degree, at least you have a fallback plan and then you can do whatever you want with that. So that was like step one. And then I was trying to figure out like, what's my path? I mean, being in Texas, I had never heard of anybody working in Hollywood, remotely even like related to Hollywood, especially from San Antonio. Someone knew somebody who worked on Star Wars Episode 1, who went to school at Texas A&M. And so they got their master's in visualization there and got their way over. So I heard that when I was in like 8th grade, I think, and that was it. I had it and it was like, I want to go get my master's at Texas A&M. That was what I was working towards. So that's when I like made that plan and got a computer science degree, and you could go in with a technical or an art degree. So once I got there, and I also like trying to find out like, back then, this is before IMDb, before LinkedIn, before any of these like online resources, I'd have to like watch the credits and somehow try to find out where people went to school and where they worked and what their career paths were. And sometimes I emailed them and sometimes I got responses. But then after I got to A&M, still being able to land a job at one of your big top 4 animation studios was also difficult. So this is kind of luck and kind of crazy, but I went to my first SIGGRAPH, which is a technical graphics conference in 2009, and I was listening to a talk from someone from DreamWorks in the rigging department. And I was really inspired by their work, and I was looking for a thesis project for myself, like an idea. And so I ended up going up to him afterwards and trying to convince him to tell me more about how they did this. And then somehow we managed to get him on my thesis committee. And that was a first time for DreamWorks and definitely a first time for Texas A&M. And so that, I think, helped me, build a relationship with DreamWorks. And so I finished up 10 years at DreamWorks, and then actually I'm now at Spire Animation, which is a startup, which I never expected to jump over, but the startup life has been really fun too, so it's been really good.
Yeah, everybody has all these really cool adventures and stories. My path into animation is pretty straightforward and kind of boring, to be honest. So I came to LA for college. I went to Loyola Marymount University, but I went to business school because I was supposed to be the kid that worked at Hyundai or Samsung or something like that. But I knew that when I came down to LA, all I knew for some reason was like, oh, Cartoon Network is somewhere here. And I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I want to make it there. And I'm not sure why, but I'm gonna. And so that was freshman year. And I remember looking at their website and it's like, oh, they don't accept, like sophomore and freshman interns. It's like I have to wait till a junior year. So then I just kind of waited until junior year. I was not taking any animation courses. I was very well into like my marketing courses, statistics, etc. But when I applied, I just somehow got a call back for a facilities, like a studio operations internship at Cartoon Network. And so it was very interesting because studio operations facilities, it was essentially walking around making sure the soda machines were filled with syrup, making sure that like the bathroom cabinets had like cleaners in them, wiping the tables, the like printers had ink. But it was also my first foot in the industry and also my first time recognizing like, okay, I have no idea why I didn't realize this earlier, but there's obviously jobs in animation where they don't require you to draw, of course. And so after that, I was pretty dead set on trying to get into animation, but still not like in the industry, but still not sure into exactly what. So I applied for marketing internships, never got any of those. Focus group kind of internships, never got into any of those. And eventually, I applied to an internship at Nick that I didn't end up getting, but the internship recruiter at that time told me like, hey, have you ever thought about production? And I was like, oh no, I don't know anything about animation, like in terms of production work. And I was actually talking to Nancy right before I came in here, that, yeah, I felt nervous about coming in and kind of felt like a phony because there's people who go to animation school who learn about animation processes and production. And yet here I was kind of feeling like I was taking that opportunity away from someone. But a lot of my friends who actually did go to animation school told me, it's like, honestly, the things that they teach you in school, it is very helpful, very valuable. Your money's not going to waste. Yeah, no, school's good. But there are things in like a production internship that like you would never experience within a classroom setting. And so they were like, honestly, Shin, you're not that much far off in terms of experience from where we are in these internships either. Like our gap of knowledge isn't that wide. So I was like, okay. And so I went in. Actually my like first ever like PA supervisor when I was an intern is in this audience right now. And she's now a board artist. She doesn't do production anymore. But yeah, like I got an internship at Nick, became a PA right afterwards, then became a coordinator, then went to be a coordinator somewhere else, then went to be a manager somewhere else. And like, it just kind of, I love production because it has a very clear kind of like ladder of steps, and being the person that I am, I really like organization and timelines. And it's like, okay, I'm going to be a coordinator for 2 years before I become a manager. I'm going to become a manager for 5 years before the next step, etc. And so it helps me keep track. And so far, it's working. I'm here. So, yeah, that's it.
Also, just want to say I totally resonate because I went to art school too, and then I realized I can't draw. So I'm glad production management exists.
I want to jump in and say that I resonate with Cartoon Network. When I was at CalArts, like a couple of friends worked there or interned there, and I just thought it was the coolest place. I'd like drive by in Burbank at night and kind of look at it and go, it's so cool. We visited very briefly, and I saw like, I would have loved to have stalked the soda. I would have just, it was just so cool. Like people drew on the walls and it looks so comfy and fun. So that's exciting.
They have like a pancake printer.
I heard. I heard they had a kombucha tap too. And I was like, oh my god.
Sorry, I just had to say that because I remember being such a nerd for talking about it.
No worries. Well, I know like we're already kind of almost halfway through the panel, but we would love to know a little bit more about what you do every day. So for people who probably don't know what your role means, how would you describe what you do?
Sure. I'm a director now, and what do I do? So I started as a story intern, and I started as a story artist, and honestly, I would have loved to just do that for the rest of my life. I love boarding, and I love drawing, and then I was sort of encouraged to become a head of story, and I thought, wow, I love to draw, and I can be very introverted sometimes, and just kind of I get into the craft of boarding and drawing. But then I said, well, I didn't think I could be a head of story because a lot of the heads of story at Disney Animation, well, it was a lot of men. And I was like, well, they don't know. It just seems like, how will I balance out my life and that sort of thing? And then, and also it seemed to be like, I wasn't the type of person to be that type of leader that just seemed like they commanded a room and they were very loud and big and bold. And then someone said like, well, what kind of head of story would you want to be? And I sort of described people who were my mentors, who I really admired, like Steve Anderson was a lovely director, lovely head of story. And they said, well, why don't you emulate that? You don't have to be like the other guys, honestly. You could sort of carve your own path. So then I was a head of story on Zootopia, and was very challenging and very difficult, not simply because of the job, but because of I had a child, I had like a 2-month-old baby at home. So I was just juggling a lot. But then, and again, I'd sort of, after doing Zootopia and then doing Ralph Breaks the Internet, I was like, okay, I think I like, this is fun. I like doing head of story. I like working, not only being able to board, but then being able to see the rest of the process, see editorial and see recording, and be in the rooms where you're able to be with the writers and kind of help break story. That was really exciting. And so I kind of like that and just wanted to stay in that lane. And then someone was like, maybe you ought to think about directing. And I say someone, these someones were the woman who encouraged me to be a head of story is Maggie Malone, who is part of creative development and is now doing masterful things at Netflix. And then the other person who encouraged me to be a director and really was like a huge mentor of mine was Rich Moore. So I had worked on Ralph Breaks the Internet and Wreck-It Ralph and Zootopia, and I learned so much. And so Rich was like, you can do it, and also Jim Reardon was the head of story. He's like, you can do the job. Look at me, I can do it. So they were also incredibly encouraging. And so they've gone and they've moved on to different studios, and I love them. I miss them. So now I'm still at Disney, and I feel like I'm forging my own path as a director. I was paired with Trent Corey, who was an animator, and they started doing these Zootopia Plus shorts together. And I was also in development on a feature, and I have to say, I was like, okay, which path do I choose? Do I continue with the shorts and Zootopia Plus series? And I was like, I want to know what all the other folks do. Like, I'd known story and of course editorial and that sort of area and writing in the story room, but I never really went beyond layout. So I was able to discover like the effects soup and all the other positions that there are so many positions in animation. And so while I was doing Zootopia Plus, and I got to see like animation dailies and just like really nerd out on the amazing talent that they have at Disney Animation. So now I'm back. We finished Zootopia Plus. And now I'm back in development on a feature. Then I sort of look in this, I looked in the bright light and it was like, what do I do? We go to the room. It's my writer and I have my head of story, and we have, and I'm working with Joe Pitt, who is a character designer, story artist extraordinaire. We sit in a room together and we have a lot of fun. We tell a lot of jokes. We then talk about story. We'll go back to the words and kind of break the feature, and then say, what are we having for lunch? and we again, like, what movies do we want to watch? So we have fun, and we make each other laugh, and we ask each other hard questions about story, and then we kind of go, okay, that was enough work for today. I'll see y'all tomorrow. And then we start up again the next day. Just kind of, it's like friends chatting and making stories and going, well, this thing's a flap. And then we just road test it with other people, and it's in the studio. We're just going to pitch our idea to other directors. And of course, Jennifer Lee, who's our chief creative officer. And so we just continue to do that over and over. And it's a dream come true.
So what do I do? That's the question, right? I work, as I said, I run my own boutique studio. So I wake up very, very early, take care of my plants. That's the number one thing to do. The most important thing. Have a lot of birds. So there's a lot of bird feeding that happens first thing in the morning, and squirrels. So after that is done, I work with India, Malaysia, Thailand, Los Angeles, and it's a cycle. So it just goes like that. So I basically have artists that I work with and collaborate. So illustrations and people in terms of coming up with visual designs for my physical shows, and I'm constantly doing that. There's a lot of writing and rewriting. So writing is just one concept idea, you write it out, and then oh my God, this is awesome. You wake up the next day, this is insane. So it's a lot of writing and rewriting and hating yourself for not writing it properly the first day. So there's a lot of that. And then I would say that's most of my day. That's most of my 16 hours. I put in about 15 to 16 hours a day every day because that's what I absolutely love. So it's writing, working with illustrators, and pitching. So it's a lot about polishing your pitch deck. I'm actually flying out to Lipcom today to pitch my shows. So it's a nerve-wracking thing. You pitch, and the more you pitch, the better you get at it because you're getting a lot of response. I spend a lot of time just finding anybody hey, when you hear my pitch, do you have 20 minutes to hear my pitch? I'm okay, sure. Send me a script. I'll read. I'll give you a note. So I do that. Apart from that, I do a lot of community building, while I'm waiting for my own development to take steps. So I started a program called Women Creators Program about 2-ish years ago. And I made sure the program was really about women, who are so shy that they don't want to be all themselves creators. So I created this, and I said, pushed Unreal, and we all came together and found a really great partner. And shortlisted about 40 women, and this year, 24 women got paid by Unreal Engine, and they all got to do shorts. Yeah, so I love it. Yeah, so I do a lot of giving back and creating opportunities while I wait. I just feel it's a Bible. So there's that. And the mother has been in count for 9 books. She's trying every single way to get me to be fat, so I try every single way not to get fat. So there's a lot of that, and she's a fun woman. And my mom was also in town for 6 months, and they all tried to kill my succulents. See, we come from India, okay? The water. We have to water plants, so it's every day there's a conversation about how I'm a bad mother for the plants. And they are overwatering my succulents, so I like it. Mothers, leave them alone. It's drainage. So there's a bit of that. I think I love to meditate. I love silence. So I spend a lot of time in silence, and I think that's it keeps me very happy and grounded. I love music. So I always keep hobbies that are very hobby for me, not for the world, not to put on Insta or social media. So I do what is called Bufuds, which is Indian classical music. So I practice that every day. There you go. That's what I do.
Also a plant lover here. Wake up in the morning and I walk out. I'm always trying to engineer a way to get more light onto my balcony, which is really hard. But so I actually went over to Spire Animation about a year ago as director of production workflows. Basically, it's a startup and it's comprised of people with 20, 25 years, veterans in the industry from all the animation studios, visual effects houses. So now we have a big group of people. We're all used to this traditional animation, traditional VFX pipeline. And but we wanted to do something different and build our pipeline around real-time technology. So we actually have a partnership with Epic Games. And so we're trying to bring as much of our pipeline into Unreal Engine. So that means like it's completely different. It's like trying to build a new pipeline. What can you get inside the engine? What can you not get? My day-to-day is basically trying to talk to all the artists. A lot of them are here today. Trying to talk to a lot of the artists, trying to bridge the gap between engineering and production. And like I was always in like the artist realm of like rigging and simulation hair, but I didn't know about editorial and story and art. And so I've gotten I've educated myself a lot on that and how to get editorial workflows. And we're trying to build an entire pipeline for every artist. Some days it's about remote virtual machines and how do we get infrastructure. So all these areas that I like kind of know a little bit about, but having to go deep down. We're also working with India too, so the days stretch as well there as well. But yeah, and then outside of that, I love to cook and bake, like everyone else. And I should be practicing singing every. I grew up doing that, but I tell myself 30 minutes. But I can do it.
We are in a fierce competition. You're all like, she can do it. I can do it. Absolutely. I've made my list. And
Does the baking start in the pandemic? I, as a production manager on specifically a production label, of course. Sorry, that was a really bad sentence. So as a production manager, I'm currently on a project called Spider-Man Freshman Year over at Marvel. I do a little bit of everything with everybody. I'm in story meetings, I'm in editorial meetings, I talk with writers, I talk with overseas, I talk with art and design, casting, even like wider executives, wider studio management about workflows, processes, especially because in Marvel, the animation branch is fairly new. We mostly got ramped up last year. And so it's been a lot of kind of at this point in time looking back at the year and kind of where can we continue moving and growing to better places. And so, I mean, that's the reason why I love production. And I mean, I'm sure that's the reason why Mansi loves production too. Like, we get to talk and get to know everybody. My experiences, though, as like a coordinator and manager definitely have been different because as a coordinator, I felt like I had a bit more freedom to essentially like be quote unquote like in a general sense like friends with everybody. Get to really like know everybody in that kind of casual sense. As a manager, because since there's now kind of like a line in terms of valuations and making sure that everything is running smoothly. Sometimes like relationships can't really be formed in like the same way, but that doesn't mean that I have a lack of relationships with anybody on my team. Because I think that's what's most important of a leader, to be able to recognize everybody's hard work, making sure that we're keeping in touch with them, making sure that they feel like they're heard. And so a lot of my day is making sure that within this virtual like work from home kind of process that I emphasize as much as possible that my doors are open to my crew members, and that I'm here to help, just like navigate difficulties during these honestly like pretty trying times in both the world and this industry, honestly. So, yeah.
So round of claps to everybody. So, just a heads up, 10 minutes out from 4:30, we'll be having opportunity for all of you to ask questions. So get your questions ready. We'll ask a couple more questions and we'll open it up to you. But, because our panel is about leadership, we have a question about leadership. So we wanted to ask each of you, what was the hardest skill to develop as a leader and in your leadership role that maybe you were surprised by, or just something that took you so long to get to? Or feel free to share. Shin, do you want to start?
Yeah. This one's actually really easy for me to answer, because I honestly, one of my biggest issues, is that I am like outright like a workaholic, and my biggest difficult skill to develop and that I'm still working on to this day is finding a work-life balance, which is so important as a leader because, honestly, if I can't compose myself and keep myself in like the best state of mind, then there's only so much that I can do for my team. And so even though it's like ironic, even though I feel like I'm putting in a lot of work and I feel like, oh, I'm sacrificing A, B, and C's so for the betterment of my team, if that leads to burnout and if that in the long run I can't stay in this marathon, then like it does more harm than help, really. And so the biggest thing for me is just maintaining that work-life balance and knowing how to set boundaries for myself. That's
So one of the things I think that was the most difficult, and came out of a conversation with someone who's here today, yesterday, was picking your battles, trying to figure out, and I think that only comes out of a lot of practice, a lot of experience, but trying to understand, there's a lot of issues that come up in your coworkers, your colleagues, people that report to you, upper management, even workflows, pipeline decisions that have to be made. But sometimes trying to prioritize what's worth fighting for and what's not is actually a skill to have, because you don't want to fight for all the little things and then not get the big thing when it comes up. And I think that's a constant learning. I don't think I've nailed it, and I don't think a lot of people do, but I think that's a constant learning
strategy. For me, I think I'm still working on it. There are two things that I've learned, when I was given the opportunity to lead with the Makepeace. With 3 people, I started driven, but it became over 1,000 people that I ended up managing. And so one of the hardest things was that I never had leaders, and I had bosses. There's a big difference between leaders and bosses. But one beautiful thing that I learned from Pauline, who was the vice president of Wither, was trust. As a leader, I think one of the most important things is to trust yourself. And trust that it's okay to fail. And trust the other person completely. Because that's when magic really happens. So I would say that in a world where it's really hard to trust and give that, because it's all about the human connection. So I would say trust is one really important salutary thing. And the second thing is just learning how to delegate. And what's priority? On a daily basis, we have 500 things to do. And when you manage a small group, or even right now, I'm working with 15, 16 people. I learn to delegate. So every day I say, okay, what are the 10 things that need to get done by the end of this week? Just focus on the most important things and let the other things in the slide. Because when you focus on the little things that don't matter, when you kind of lose your essence quite a bit. So I would say that's the second thing. And probably the third thing is we just have a lot of spot, being a leader can be very stressful. So try and do something else that where you're not the leader. So I constantly take lessons or foreign classes, or I humiliate myself. Take the hardest thing that I will do so that I can understand again that, oh, it's all right. This is how hard it is to be in an intern's shoes, So respect is something that you always, no matter how small the person is or how big the person is that you're working with. I learned that from my security guard back in India. Say, why are you so nice to them? And say, well, what else can I do? So I would always say as a leader, try and be nice. Anything else. Because that person would be well future point or the boss or something else. So niceness is a very important.
Fun. That was great. I don't know how to follow I have all of these. I think those are all amazing qualities to work-life balance is an issue, and how to delegate and how to manage time, picking your battles. Everything you said is perfect. Trust. I think for me it was, and still doing this even just today, it's the confidence, the trusting yourself part, really. Because even today I was sending emails because you do have millions of things to do. And a small thing as women, I don't know, generalizing, but I always apologize. And even in an email, I said, oh, I'm sorry this is a late reply. And I just was like, just stop saying sorry. Like, it's okay, I'm busy, it's fine. So there's all these little things every day that I have to just remind myself, because it just seems like I'm in a storm all the time, and yet I thrive off of that too. I love when I'm in the eye of the hurricane, of a storm, because then that's where I get into a zone, and I know what I'm doing, and I know I'm confident, but it seems sometimes I'm in the storm as well, and so I just try to, I think honestly, one little thing that I do as a leader is just try to make progress every day. I don't have to throw the Hail Mary, or I don't have to make it perfect right now. I just need to make sure that there's progress being made. And then just save that for another day. But I also love just be nice to people. It's really not that hard to thank them, because I just know that I was in those shoes, and that's how I would have wanted to be treated, and that's who I respected were the folks who were incredibly kind and generous and nice, on top of being amazing leaders and artists and producers and that sort. So, awesome. Thank you, everyone.
So we have one last question before we go to audience questions. So how many of you are trying to break into animation? Okay. How many of you work in animation? Okay, great. Well, something that we as Asian queens in animation always talk about, and just our team, we're all fairly new into the industry, and something we realize is breaking in is tough, but thriving in the industry and surviving the industry is harder. So a question we want to ask is, when you feel, there's moments where you feel like, am I going to make it? Am I going to do it? Because sometimes, like, as you grow in the industry, it's so tough to just keep going. So what keeps you going when you feel like, you kind of just feel like you're in the dumps? Like, what helps you move forward?
Family, friends, life outside, and also remembering how just fortunate I am. And honestly, it's like I'm going to make mistakes all the time. I remember the time when I didn't have a job, when I was in your shoes, and I would dream of having a job. I put in applications everywhere. I applied to Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network, all these different studios, and I always got rejected. And I would have dreams where I got a call from Nickelodeon and I got hired, and I was so happy. And then I woke up and I was jobless. And so when I got into Disney as a story intern, I just never took any day for granted. I remember our first day, we walked by Glenn Keane, amazing Glenn Keane, the animator. And he saw our faces, our bright faces, and he said, I remember my first day. And I remember being so excited. And I remember feeling like, oh, they're going to find me out, and they're going to realize they got the wrong portfolio, the wrong artist, and they're going to kick me out any day now. And I thought, wow, if Glenn Keane feels that way, That's pretty crazy. And then my mentor was Stevie Wormers, who is a great story artist and director. And she said she felt that same way. And so I kind of feel like, look, and when I got the internship, I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I don't know how long this is going to last. It sort of feels like Survivor, where you're like, someone's going to go every week. And so I just made sure that I loved the work that I was doing, that I was happy with it, and I was very proud, and that every day I knew I gave my best, and that's all, and it's like, if I could live with that, great. And I also knew, I got that foot in the door, and it might lead to a better opportunity. Maybe Disney is not the right place for me. That's what I would say to myself. Maybe I belong at Cartoon Network or somewhere else around the world, maybe. And so I just was sort of comfortable, knowing that I can do this. And if it doesn't work out, then I'll do it somewhere else. I'll find the place where I belong. And I always said, I know that it's important to work with the right people, not necessarily work on the greatest stuff. And so I was just just be happy. Know that you're putting your best foot forward. And if it happens, great. And if it doesn't, and I knew once I was a story artist, I'm I would go forward on a children's I'm boarding. This was the goal I set out for myself, and I can do it. And so, even if I failed, then at least I tried, and that I could always kind of go back and just go this is the thing that I always loved anyways, and is that so bad? So I always sort of know I have this safety net. I have family and friends, and honestly, it's mostly just I'm going to try my hardest, but I can't control other elements, and so all I'm going to focus on is what I can control and make sure that it is the best, and putting my best foot forward. And if I fail, but I learn and continue to grow. So
I want to say that how do you stay in the industry? How do you stay happy and healthy? I went through severe depression many years ago, especially after I quit working for these really top studios, and coming out of it. I thought, I'm going to walk the red carpet. I'm going to win this Academy Award and that and this. Really had very high visions for myself. But I think the most important thing is to first accept that it's a very, very hard place, no matter what. It's the hardest place to wake up to, whatever that we're doing, because we're not doing it just for the money. We're doing it because we're crazy and we're passionate, So that needs to be put somewhere on your vision board. And the second most important thing that I realized is, I'm not saying this for everyone, for myself, is when you, there's a proverb, I think, in my culture, and it says stop digging too many wells. Just dig one. A lot of us, what happens is that, for me, we make some noise here for a couple of years, and 5 years here, and then 5 years there, and 5 years here, and then finally we're exhausted and burnt out because we feel like we put in so much out there. But if you can just stay really focused and say, this is the one thing that I want for myself, and this is the one thing that I'm going to invest my time and energy and put in 2 hours. I'm not saying 20 hours, put in 2 hours every day to take that risk and to walk that path. I think we'll get where we'll be. And, if we dilute our energy, by the time you're 45 or 50, the energy kind of reduces. So try and see, if you're really young now, try and stay on that one path, focus and concentrate and get there. Because that laser-like energy that you have, so it's that focus, nothing can stop you. But know that development, which I do, takes years, 16 years to get a show greenlit or to go into production. A lot of people will go into production, and sometimes the studios will say, this is out of trend, we're going to cancel the show. So be prepared. Find help. Find therapy, or find movie with friends or family to talk to, and stay in a community like this. Speak out if you're going through something hard. Just speak out, because there's so many people that are going through hard stuff. So know that when you're hitting a wall, that you're not alone. And I think that's a very important thing to have. We have something like this, yeah.
I totally agree about the community and, being vulnerable, especially and having, I mean, like I said, growing up in Texas, the idea of being the only like Indian person going into animation, that was crazy. And yeah, and like now look at this, 3, 4, 5 Asians up on a panel, which is amazing. I think, like we have 15 years ago when I started this path, and then even 10 years ago, there was a couple of options in animation in this country. Like starting about 5, 6 years ago, we started seeing Netflix, and we started seeing so many other boutique companies show up. There's so much more opportunity for us in the country. I think just knowing that it's not the linear path, like it's okay to take some other turns while you're getting to the final destination. And actually changing the final destination is also okay. That's also important. And then especially now with the pandemic, like work from home, remote, and so many other like technologies become such a forefront. Computer graphics has become such a forefront. Storytelling is everywhere. Medical industry, military. I mean, it's even looking at Unreal Engine and like the number of industries that they're a part of. It's insane. So there are like, even though you have your heart set on, I want to be this person at this company, it's okay to, go a different way. You might find happiness in other ways as well.
Um, what gets me out on, I guess, like hardships? So yes, having a community around you, loved ones, whether that be friends or family. I know, like for me personally, I spiral quite a bit in my personal time. And so it's just kind of like setting different like boundaries of what is that thing that's going to pull me out of the water, regardless of this, it's like a hobby, something that I love, or someone that I love that can help pull me out of that space. And then after that, yeah, as Josie said, just kind of like recognizing what elements are within my control and which elements are out of my control, because that is a very, very, very big thing that can help kind of analyze, your so-called like failures and like why something didn't go the way that you did. Maybe it's not just, what you did and your expectations, but all of the different variables and elements around you that have affected it. I think for me personally, just really quick, that I wanted to add is, in the middle of the pandemic, I went through a really, really hard time just questioning like why I was doing what I was doing. Why was I putting myself in this space of just really severe burnout, sacrificing myself for others, even though I do loved working with people so much. It came to a point where I didn't know what was left of myself. I was having a bunch of informationals with a bunch of people from this industry, within this industry, which, regardless of whether you're trying to get into this industry or whether you're like a intern or a PA, no matter how far you go, I would suggest to never stop having informationals, because you can really learn a lot from everybody around you. But someone was asking me, it's like, why do you need to put in your 100%? And I was like, because I have to do my best for the people around me. And they're like, well, like, why is that your definition? Like, why is your best the way that it is? Like, what if your best is your 60% that day, etc. And so recognizing that, honestly, sometimes what I say to my team is, maybe it's not your best foot forward, but if it's a foot forward, and if that's your best, then that's fine. Because this is all a partnership, and as cheesy as it sounds, teamwork is the dream work.
We've got a couple minutes, so we want to open the floor to any questions. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to raise your hand. Okay, yes. You can shout out your question.
Oh, that's a good question.
Anyone want to take that first? Ha- courage is a beautiful word. You have to see whether what you're doing is going to benefit you first and benefit more than you. And I think courage comes automatically. When you see that you're in a position of responsibility where you can give back, oh my God, like you have no idea the amount of courage that can come inside of you. Like you can call on the universe and it'll come to you. So I think when I was given the opportunity to run Rhythm and Hues, and I never run a studio before, I didn't even probably do and I didn't even do my college, by the way. So it was just an opportunity, and it's really up to you to say, is this going to benefit where I'm going? And if yes, then say yes. And if no, then ask yourself why no. And then I think you'll find the courage and speak to family, speak to friends. They're always there to guide you and help you. So I would say that's how.
Would anyone else want to add to that? Okay. Well, does anyone else have any other question? Yes.
The back, yes.
Yes. Get the business cards.
From a production perspective, something that, especially because of work from home and I literally cannot see what people are doing, it's really, really important to just like emphasize with your team, to be transparent of working conditions and like no, like don't put in ghost hours. Like please just tell your production like leadership the amount of work and the amount of effort. And honestly, if it doesn't fit within a 40-hour work schedule, just be upfront about that. I think a lot of artists and a lot of people get nervous about like, oh, if I can't fit in all my work within 40 hours, that just means I'm not good enough. That means I'm not fast enough. That means that like I'm gonna get in trouble if I bring this up and if it's not done. But majority of the time, especially now with the rise of streaming and with all this content being made, most likely it's gonna be the schedule and the resources and the budget that is actually really pushing these kinds of working conditions. And so a lot of production leadership can't tell that, well, they can, but a lot of the times they don't take action until someone speaks up, honestly. And of course, for me on my part, when I see early signs, like I will try, but a lot of things get busy. There's a lot of different departments. And so if artists themselves can also, take that courage to recognize like they won't be faulted for having a large workload and they can come to their production leadership and trust that, they will take active steps to find balance within their crew members, then, yeah.
Does anyone else want to add to that?
I was going to say the other quick thing is to like make sure your leadership also sets a good example too. You've been very conscious of like not sending emails out past like 10 o'clock or on weekends and stuff. It happens. But like I think when the leaders are also following that in your team, it encourages your artists to also follow suit.
Awesome. Well, just to add on to that, also, like I was in an interview recently where I loved the answer and I knew this person would be a good leader because they said, well, if you're working a lot of overtime, there's just something wrong in the way we're doing things and we have to like fix it. And that really showed me like, whoa, they really care about people and they want, so that's why this panel is so important, because it's so great to have amazing leaders with these lovely women here. So everyone just a round of applause for sharing. And thank you all for coming to this panel and for spending an hour with us. And feel free to, connect with everybody and like follow everyone, and hope to see you in next Lightbox. But again, just a round of applause for everybody this evening. Well, thank you so much and have a great rest of your LightBox Expo. Yes. Hey, dear. Cool.